There is a country that is not short of money but live like it could go bankrupt at any moment. This is Norway in the far west of northern Europe. How wealthy is Norway? He has one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world by the end of 2025, size about $2.20 trillion to every man, woman and child in Norway, about $385,000 per person, equivalent to RMB close to 2.80 million yuan. This fund holding about 1.5% of the shares of the global public company. We have a presence in over 7,000 companies. From Apple to Nvidia behind the titan you can name, mostly Norway, but this is a country. His government, you are only allowed to use your own funds every year, a tiny piece. Spend up to the fund's expected annual income, that's 3% of market capitalization. Lock up the rest of the principal. No one is allowed to move a country rich in oil. Manage yourself like a poor man who can't pay his debts. Behind this lies the deepest fear of the Norwegians. This fear you start in 1940. The first illusion of neutrality. Norway used to be a firmly neutral country during World War I. He dodged the meat grinder with neutrality. So he believed me, as long as I didn't take sides and don't cause trouble. Geographically hidden in the corner of Europe, war can't burn me. One morning in April 1940 this idea is broken. Germany didn't say hello, didn't declare war, rushed over the head of this neutral country. Overnight the warships sailed into the fjord. Skirmishers at the airport harbor capital. Maharajas prepare for battle. One by one the king fled the country with his government. Within a few weeks the whole country has changed. Masters, the Norwegians understand the so-called neutrality cannot stop the tank. No mercy. The next 5 years of occupation, these 5 years, it was the key to understanding all the options in post-war Norway. A country that has been ruined by neutrality. The first big thing after the war, you bury yourself. A century-old tradition of neutrality. In 1949, Norway became a founding member of NATO, one of the member states. He simply tied himself into the Western Security Alliance. Norway is starving for the throat of the North Atlantic to the open sea and the Soviet Union across a land border of more than 190 kilometers. Such a location put him in the great power game. It's always an important grid. Not qualified to pretend to be neutral. The first lesson in small country survival. Norway fell in 5 years in exchange for Chapter 2. Before he came, it became a mature country. Christmas Eve 1969, Norway discovered a large oil field in the North Sea. Windfall from the sky. But Norway's real luck did not lie in discovering, but in the time of origin. He is already a mature system, a country with clean government. Stanford political scholar Terry Lynn Carr has a judgment: most oil-producing countries operate under a national system. Before the civil service and the rule of law took shape, we became dependent on oil. Money is like a flood that has opened into a society that has not yet fixed its levees. Oil in Angola, it became the #1 export in 1973. This was followed by more than 20 years of civil war. Most of the money from oil goes into the pockets of the powerful. The common people live a hard life guarding the oil field. Equatorial Guinea rose from a poor country in 8 years. GDP per capita. Once high oil-producing fruit, but he's still a specimen of the resource curse. The other side of great wealth, its rampant corruption and perennial decline in people's livelihood. That's the resource curse. A gift from God in the end, it crushed the national luck. The Norwegians reversed the order. Before the oil arrived, he has long had high welfare and high trust. Sound system, mature society with clean civil servants. The rules are set. The people are also used to earning a living by their hands. When this huge windfall fell, he has a set of sturdy cages ready-made, can hold this beast rather than being carried away. The Norwegian then asked himself a question that few people ask: whose money does it belong to? The answers they gave were restrained. It doesn't belong to today's generation of Norwegians. For those Norwegians who haven't been born yet, the third one turns the underground into the above. Follow this answer. Norway has established a mechanisms that have been studied around the world to date. Government sovereign wealth fund. His logic can be explained in one sentence: oil is buried in the ground. Dig a bucket of dead assets, then invest almost all the money from the oil sale overseas. Change to stock bonds. These will lay eggs, a living asset that can be passed on to future generations. There's a triple wakefulness in this design. Almost all of the first money was invested abroad. The country spends nothing. Norway has its reasons for doing this. If a huge amount of oil dollar, throw your brain into such a small economy, the local currency will skyrocket, prices will get out of control. Industries other than oil all weighed down by this virtual fire, and you end up with one leg in the country, digging for oil. This kind of wealth from a single resource instead, the strange disease that smothered all other industries to death in economics. It is called the Dutch disease. The word comes from that year the Dutch lost money after discovering North Sea natural gas. Norway puts all its money overseas. It's like building a wall for your own economy. Keep the oil fires out. The second finance can only use a very small piece per year. The 3% rule mentioned earlier, the main fiscal guideline was set at 4% in the early years. In 2017, it was voluntarily reduced to 3%. Spend nothing but the principal earned by the fund every year. That locks one thing in: no matter which government comes to power. So many generous promises made during the election, I can't even empty out the wealth of future generations in advance. This mechanism is very governing, financially exhausted in recent years. The actual annual withdrawal of the government also under the 3% line. The third pet is also the one that impresses me the most. This is a person who treats the unborn as the present. Sitting at the table, stakeholders come to treat the country he paid for it. Thank you for a group of future generations who will never look back save a thick family background. A country, will you refrain from being a stranger 50 years later? Desire for today, it can almost support his civilized weight. Chapter 4. He never dared to lie on oil, no matter how big the oil field was. Norway didn't risk their lives either. He knew two things: all the oil would run out. Even if it's not dug out, global energy transition, fossil fuels will be phased out sooner or later, so he kept giving. The day there was no oil paved the way. His water and electricity are almost arranged for the whole country. Electricity is clean and cheap. It is also because the electricity is cheap and clean. His electric car penetration rate has surged to the first place in the world. 2025, 95.9% of new car sales in Norway are pure electric vehicles. By December, it's almost 98%. The remaining fuel vehicles are almost only ambulances, special uses such as police cars. The same year, the entire European Union is still unable to sell electric cars. Announced plans to postpone the ban on the sale of fuel vehicles in 2035. A country that has made millions of dollars selling oil. Own people are on the world's highest proportion of electric vehicles. He has a barrel of oil under his feet. Never thought of committing to life. Business is booming in the sea. Norway is the second largest seafood exporter in the world. In 2025, the value of seafood exports, a new high of around 181.5 billion Norwegian kroner, was reached, approximately $18 billion. Salmon alone accounts for about 70%. From Tokyo to Shanghai, countless pink fish on the table, mostly from the deep, cold fjords of Norway. Chapter 5. The true cracks behind wealth. Norway's faults lie in its glossy place. So economy first. Oil was his lifeblood. But this lifeblood is shrinking. Production from 2001 peak of 3.40 million barrels per day, about 2 million barrels in 2025, but did not raise the second pillar. International Monetary Fund. The 2025 report states that get rid of oil and gas and funds, Norway's domestic economy is losing money on the books. Except for oil and salmon, this country, it's almost impossible to come up with a global company with a loud name next door. Sweden has IKEA, Sweden has Ericsson. Norway has no welfare and is also in opposition. How generous is Norway's sick leave system? Please send a new one from the first day of leave. You can get it for up to 1 year. A few days of minor illness without a doctor's certificate, just say it yourself. So he became a collaborator and called in sick. Most countries spread out evenly. In 2022, each migrant worker is short of poultry for nearly 19 days a year due to illness. That's twice as much as Sweden. This system, he's quietly dragging the productivity of the country. There's a dark side to fiber optics. Death rates from drug use are high in Europe. About 300 people die from overdoses every year, more than twice as much as the other Nordic countries. Debt and house are equally overwhelming. The debt of Norwegian households about 220% of disposable income. One of the best in the world. National average house price by the end of 2025 about 3.20 million renminbi. The capital Oslo exceeds 5 million renminbi, up about 67% in 5 years. Young people are finding it increasingly difficult to buy a house. The deeper hidden danger lies in people and safety. A country needs to maintain its population without increasing or decreasing. The average woman has 2.1 children. Norway is only 1.44. It's way below the line. People are getting old, fewer people can work. That generous set of benefits is getting harder and harder to support, and he is guarding the gate of Peking University in NATO. It is the front line for the West to confront Russia under pressure. Norway is spending about 600 billion kroner to expand its military. No matter how thick the family is, you can't hide the fragility in the bones of a country. The wisdom of iron language to manage vulnerability well. Norway's answer to the survival of small states. It has nothing to do with being strong, and he was talking about something else. After recognizing your vulnerability, how to put this fragile tube well. His sobriety is entirely due to lack of confidence. He knows he is small, know that luck will run out one day, knowing that the future doesn't necessarily belong to you, so he is humble and restrained. Save money for future generations. This sobriety with pessimism is his true confidence. Awake to see destiny, treat all beings with compassion. See you in the next episode. Trailer. Also in the North Atlantic there was a country that was smaller, colder and lonelier. He doesn't have Norwegian oil. The population of the country is less than a medium-sized city, but once turned the whole country into a gambling house. Global banks crashed and went bankrupt overnight. How did he escape the ruins of bankruptcy? Rising on volcanic hot springs and cod. The next episode of Small Country Survival, Iceland. See you soon.